Welcome to another episode of History Now the Future, a show where we take a look at some of the most pressing issues of today using history as our guide and the future as our destination. I'm Corey Bradford, and since our last episode, we now know who Kamala Harris's vice presidential pick will be. And it was none of the people that I thought it was going to be. That's right, Corey struck out. Instead, Harris chose the current governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, to be her vice presidential nominee. And if you're asking yourself, who Tim Walz? I'm sorry, 2000s flashback. See, Tim Walz makes me think of Paul Wall, which makes me think of Mike Jones. Yeah, never mind, it's a millennial thing. Many of you probably don't know much about Tim Walz. A PBS News/NPR poll shows that nearly 71% of Americans have no strong opinion on Tim Walz because they've never heard of him before. Tim Walz is a true dark horse candidate, and he brings a bit of much needed calm to this very chaotic election cycle. Or does he? Tim Walz served in the Army National Guard for more than 24 years. Walz was also a high school history teacher before serving in the U.S. House of Representatives from Minnesota's 1st District, and he became the governor of Minnesota in 2019. Walz was actually governor of Minnesota during the George Floyd incident, and he was forced to activate the Minnesota National Guard after the protests there intensified. In response to Walz's handling of that situation, then President Donald Trump said he was, quote, very happy with Tim Walz's actions there, and stated that he fully agreed with how the governor handled things. Trump even tried to take credit for activating the National Guard in Minnesota during the protest, even though there's no evidence that Trump had any influence on the situation. Governor Walz later called Minnesota's legislature up for 2 special sessions, the second of which ended in significant police reform for the state. Now, with a track record like that, how exactly does Donald Trump respond to Tim Walz becoming Kamala Harris's new VP pick? Well, Trump is once again claiming that an election has been stolen, but this time it was stolen from his arch enemy, Joe Biden.
Where the presidency was taken away from Joe Biden, and I'm no Biden fan, but I'll tell you what, from a constitutional standpoint, from any standpoint you look at, they took the presidency away. And people were saying he lost after the debate, he couldn't win. Well, I don't know that that's true necessarily. But whether he could win or he couldn't win, he had the right to run, and they took it away. They said they're going to use the 25th Amendment. They're going to hit you hard. Either we can do it the nice. I know exactly, because I know a lot of people on the other side, believe it or not. And they said, we'll do it the nice way or we'll do it the hard way. And he said, all right.
Motherfucker, please, excuse my language, but is Trump so afraid of the Harris-Walz ticket that he's actually defending Joe Biden? Or is this just a part of his long-time strategy to sow the seeds of mistrust in certain institutions? Trump is once again spreading conspiracy theories in the hopes that these theories will delegitimize any defeat he suffers this November. So let's just break down the history real quick. First of all, Trump's comments here about the Constitution show that, like most people who like to bring up that document but have never actually read it, he has little to no knowledge of its actual contents. See, there is no constitutional basis for political parties. The Constitution doesn't even mention them. Therefore, the Constitution does not stipulate how these parties can choose their nominee for president. Political parties are private organizations who can make and change their rules at any given time. Many incumbent presidents, from Franklin Pierce to James Buchanan, have been denied another nomination for president from their party. As far as primary votes go, in 2008, Hillary Clinton actually got slightly more primary votes than Barack Obama. But Obama earned more delegates, especially more superdelegates, which is why he was eventually nominated by the party. As for all this talk about the 25th Amendment that Trump brought up, Joe Biden claims to be stepping down willingly. So that doesn't involve the 25th Amendment. And if Harris and Joe's cabinet actually did try to invoke provisions from the 25th Amendment to remove Joe Biden from office, that would actually be a constitutional act. So that contradicts Trump's own notion that the Constitution is being violated here. This is further proof that the Trump campaign doesn't quite know how to effectively campaign against Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. So they're going for the sexist card against Harris, they're trying to call Tim Walz's military record into question, and now they're even trying to claim an election was stolen from a man they said for months had no business running for president. But there is no legal way around this ticket, and Trump will either have to adjust his methods here, or he should get ready to lose to a black woman and a Steve Martin lookalike. How will he ever explain that to his country club? We have a great show for you all today. This week, we give you a much needed lesson in social media, and I break down how we should stop blaming America's education problem on teachers and start blaming it on ourselves. But first, it's time for Trending Down. Welcome to Trending Down, a segment where we take a look at some of the more trivial topics floating around the internet this past week. And the 2024 Paris Olympics came to an end this past weekend, and it was an Olympics for the ages. It seems like there were so many controversies in this year's Olympics, from the opening ceremony to disputes over Algerian boxers. But despite all of that, the world came together for a peaceful event, and we saw some amazing examples of athletic talent from all across the globe. But then towards the end, we saw this. Okay, now, if you're a little confused about what you just saw, don't worry, we all are. You see, for the first and no doubt last time in Olympic history, breakdancing was featured as an Olympic sport. Now, breakdancing, also known as just breaking, was a popular form of dance from the 1980s, and it started in New York City as a part of early hip-hop culture. And the woman you just saw came to Paris all the way from Australia to break down what breaking is all about. Or maybe she was just trying to break breaking, like the very art of it. Her name is Rachel Gunn, aka Ray Gunn. Too easy. And she's actually a college professor of cultural studies. She has a PhD. And with that performance, she is also now an Olympic athlete. My favorite part was at the beginning when she did the little fake yawn, because you know in her mind, she thought she just ate that shit. Oh, she ate it all right, if we're talking about the word ate as it's used in skateboarder slang. She was just out there cooking with no seasoning whatsoever. Now, Olympics, of all the controversies from Paris, this has to be the most egregious. First of all, breaking was started by black kids in the Bronx. So did you consult any black people when you decided to bring breakdancing to the Olympics? Where was all the black people at? The gold medalist for the women's breaking competition was from Japan. Silver went to Lithuania. And bronze went to China. No black folks. Wow. This must be how white people feel watching Disney movies these days. Even Snoop Dogg, who popped up at nearly every Olympic event, made sure to stay the hell away from this one. See, we talk a lot about cultural appropriation, and I know this lady probably means well, but that right there, that is why when black people create something cool and people from outside the community start doing it their way, we just have to leave it alone. Rachel Gunn's performance is a perfect example of why you will never hear the words bling bling in a rap song ever again. Next up, RIP to cable TV. Many of you have been cutting the cord and canceling your cable and satellite TV subscriptions for years now, opting to get your entertainment from streaming services instead. But this past week might be the actual week when we look back and say that was the week cable TV literally died. So this week, Warner Brothers Discovery announced that after reassessing the value of the cable TV networks they owned, Warner Brothers discovered that their networks are worth $9.1 billion less than originally thought. Just 24 hours later, Paramount Global announced that their Viacom channels were worth $5.89 billion less than they previously thought. And just because this pity party was too much fun to not make an appearance, AMC Networks showed up later that same day to say that their channels were just $97 million less valuable. At least it wasn't a billion, right? All of this was triggered after Warner Brothers Discovery, in a very public and disastrous fashion, lost their rights to the NBA, leading them to having to reassess their books. On top of that, Paramount had to reevaluate their books after getting bought out by Skydance Media. Maybe that deal is still happening now, I'm not really sure. This news also caused stock prices to plummet for these companies, and honestly, When it comes to the viability of cable TV, this is kind of their own fault. Many of these channels refuse to compete with the streaming services, instead opting to invest in redundant reality TV shows, played out reruns of old sitcoms, and the same movies we've seen 1,000 times. Nickelodeon is basically just all SpongeBob now, MTV is all catfish and ridiculousness, and that's really fucking ridiculous, and BET has played the movie Baby Boy once a week, every week for the past 12 years now. How many times can I see Jody getting choked out before I switch to Netflix? Now, I grew up on cable TV, and I will surely miss it, but most of these channels have long drifted from their original intent. Many of them lack innovation and creative new ideas, and most people only have cable TV these days to watch live sports. Well, for cable TV, it's the bottom of the ninth. The bases are not loaded, and the crowd has mostly cleared out. 3 strikes, and you're out. Also, that movie 3 Strikes. BET used to play that one too much too, and it's like, come on guys, it's an okay movie, but where the fuck are all the music videos at? Like, what happened there? Okay, so in this edition of Lessons in Social Media, I'm going to take you down the rabbit hole of boomer bait, fake news, conservative satire pages, mostly found on sites like Facebook. These pages will look something like this. They're usually aimed at people who are over the age of 55. They're usually trying to mock liberals or celebrate some celebrity for doing something super conservative. Like for instance, in this one, this is a completely fake story. This page is claiming that Sylvester Stallone turned down $500 million to be in some woke Disney project. Obviously, it's ridiculous to think that Disney would even pay a single individual that much money to be in any project. But also, this is a completely fake story. Now, these pages label themselves as satire so they can circumvent any type of misinformation rules on social media. If you call them out and say, hey, you're spreading blatant misinformation, they can just say, oh no, we're satire. This is all in fun and this is all just for entertainment. The problem is a lot of people who end up seeing these posts actually think these stories are real. So I'm going to show you how to spot these pages and how to ultimately eliminate them from your news feed. So here's an example of a more recent post. This page calls itself Baltimore Ravens Fans. Yet, as you can see by this story and all of the stories on this page, it has nothing to do with the Baltimore Ravens or football in general. Then the page will say something that's completely false, right? This page claims that Simone Biles told the U.S. sports delegation to kick Brittany Griner to the curb. Okay, that never happened. And I'm guessing the goal for this page is to trick a bunch of conservatives into believing this story. Then they will comment and celebrate Simone Biles for something that never happened, right? They'll talk crap about Brittany Griner. You might get some liberals interacting with the page doing the opposite. And then you're going to get a lot of people like me who say, well, this is completely fake. This never happened, but it doesn't matter. If you comment on these pages, you are engaging with the page, you're giving this post life, and you're ensuring that more people will eventually see it. And some of these posts are so egregious, like this one actually has rated satire in the corner there. Like this is actively telling you this is satire, this is a fake story. And yet you go to the comment section, tons of people actually falling for this. Tons of people actually think that Gordon Ramsay refused to seat Robert De Niro at one of his restaurants. Of course, that didn't happen. But I do find it interesting that the folks who are always complaining about cancel culture are trying to cancel Robert De Niro because he hates Trump. Hypocrisy much? Another obsession these pages have is saying that a conservative talk show host is going to replace a seemingly liberal TV personality. Like this LSU Tigers page posted this story that has nothing to do with the LSU Tigers, saying that Tucker Carlson was going to replace Jimmy Kimmel on ABC. A total lie, of course. They didn't even bother putting the real ABC sign. That's like the ABC from Australia or something. And when I first started seeing these pages, I just thought it was conservative rage bait. Like I thought it was a bunch of far-right extremists making these weird fantasies they could all live in. But the more you think about it, these pages actually make older conservatives look bad because they get in the comment section, they fall for these stories, and it makes them look really gullible and kind of stupid. So maybe these pages are intended to make conservatives look bad. But ultimately, all these pages care about is whether or not you interact with them, whether you believe the stories and you get in the comments and think that they're real, or you don't believe the stories and you get in the comments and you call them fake. It doesn't matter. When you like these posts, When you share these posts, when you interact with these posts, you are giving it engagement, you're making the post more popular. So the best thing to do when you see these posts is just completely ignore them. Don't like them, don't interact with them in any way. Just keep scrolling. Or better yet, hit that little X in that corner right there, because then Facebook will show you less of these posts. Hopefully they will disappear from your timeline, and hopefully we can starve these pages out and get rid of them altogether. Also, I think the people making these pages need to Google the word satire, because this isn't satire. This is just fucking stupid. Hot take. Why do we always blame America's education problem on teachers instead of blaming it on Americans who simply don't want to learn? Every few weeks, I'll see a post on social media that says something like this: we need to stop teaching our kids Algebra 2 and pre-calculus in high school and start teaching them financial literacy. We should teach them how to do their taxes and how to get a loan instead of teaching them about rise over run. Or you'll hear someone say something like, my school never taught me how to get a mortgage, but thank God I know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. All of this seems to be suggesting that our schools aren't teaching children the right things, that schools should be focusing more on teaching economics and more practical skills, as if they're not already doing that. And most of these statements are being made by people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe even older. These people haven't actually been in school for a while now. They don't really remember what they even learned in school, and therein lies the problem. See, more than likely, your school did teach some form of personal finance. You just don't remember because you weren't fucking paying attention. You see, I went to school in small town Alabama, a state that has been between 45th and 49th in education since fucking always, and even we had a mandatory economics class. The whole state did. But it usually took place in the first or second semester of your senior year. For me, it took place in the second semester, the spring semester of my senior year. Now, really think about that. Spring semester of senior year? Yeah, nobody's paying attention to anything by that point, not even the teachers. So maybe they should bump those econ classes up a few semesters. But most schools are teaching this stuff. It's just that a lot of students aren't paying attention. Now, why is that? And have you ever noticed that it's usually conservatives who complain the most about our schools? The same people stressing personal accountability in every other area of life, but they rarely apply that personal accountability logic to the American student. These people would rather blame everything on the government or the Department of Education. How many times have you heard this online? Schools have been getting worse every year since the Department of Education started. We need to get rid of it. Do these people even know what the Department of Education does? I'll tell you what they don't do. They don't set educational standards for public schools. They don't even determine what high school curriculums will look like. All the Department of Education does is determine what federal funding for education will be used on. They collect data on our schools, and they try to prevent discrimination in public schools. The states have total control over what kids will actually learn in public schools and how they will learn it. That's why a state like Massachusetts has very high test scores, and a state like Louisiana has some of the lowest. Public schools are largely affected by a state's attitude and culture when it comes to education in general. People want to blame America's drop in IQ on the Department of Education for mostly political reasons. But our schools did start going downhill in the early 1980s when the department was started. However, in this particular scenario, correlation does not equal causation. Yes, our collective IQ in the United States has been dropping since the 1980s for a number of reasons. Now, some of those reasons may be chemical and neurological in nature, and some of them may be cultural. See, the early 1980s saw the rise of nerd culture, or should I say anti-nerd culture. Around that time, many movies and TV shows began depicting smart people as nerds, geeks, dorks, and undesirables. We started teaching generations of young Americans that being smart was unattractive. It wasn't cool. And if you were extremely smart, you were probably going to be alone for most of your life. This was one of many factors that contributed to a decades-long trend of teenagers rejecting education. Now, there are a ton of reasons why education isn't stressed here like it used to be. But the majority of the teachers in this country are the only ones still trying to stress education. Not to mention, they have to deal with so many other issues beyond just educating your children. All the social issues, the political fault lines being fought over our schools, all the personal baggage that parents put on their children, not to mention They have to keep these kids safe and keep them from getting fucking shot, which happens every few weeks in our schools because of America's gun problem. These teachers might be our last line of defense against a completely undereducated, idiocracy type society. And yet, we throw them under the bus every 2 seconds whenever we need a convenient scapegoat. Now, are there some bad schools in the US? Sure. Bad teachers? Oh, absolutely. I had a few. Teachers could be doing better, yeah, and teacher unions could be doing better. But we could also start paying our teachers better. But when is someone going to say that maybe, just maybe, students could be doing better? Maybe we as a society could start encouraging young people to better educate themselves, to take their education more seriously. Or maybe you all aren't ready to have that conversation. I want to thank you all for watching another episode of History Now the Future. Now, on this week's Thursday interview episode, I sat down with astrophysicist Dakota Tyler. He's actually a college football player turned astrophysicist. He's a PhD student at UCLA, and we talked about everything from how he got involved in astrophysics and about his specific area of study, which is actually the study of exoplanets. Here's a little bit from our conversation.
So I study what are called exoplanets, short for extrasolar planets. And extrasolar, these are just planets that are outside of our solar system. So, when you look up at the sky at night, you see all of these stars. Depending on where you are, you probably can't see too many. You can see like 14 here in LA. But all of the other stars, they also have planets. Our solar system has 8 planets. Other stars also have multiple planets. And they're not like replicas of the planets that we have. It's not like they have their version of Mars and their version of Earth, their version of Jupiter. The planets, they vary wildly. Like a lot of the planets that we see are actually nothing like the planets that we see in our own solar system.
Make sure to check out that interview coming out this Thursday. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel so you'll never miss an episode. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you all next time.